Here it says the cheerleaders made spirit buttons and sold them for homecoming. The table shows the amount of profit they made for different numbers of buttons sold. Which equation represents this relationship? So when we look at the table, hopefully you see that the first column represents the number sold, that's your X coordinate, and the second column represents your profit, that's your Y coordinate. So what we're being given is a series of points. This first row is telling us when you put 50 in for X, you'll get 0 for Y. The second row is telling you that when you put 100 in for X, you get 45 for Y, and so on. So the equation that represents this situation needs to work for each of these points. So what you're going to do is you're going to substitute that first row, the 50 and 0, into each of these equations and see if it works. Keep in mind that on the state test, I have seen several questions where you substitute in that first point and it actually works for 2 of the equations. So look out for that. If it works for 2 of the equations, you've narrowed it down to those 2 choices. Now look at the second point and substitute it into those 2 equations and see what works. So let's look at this first row. When X is 50 and Y is 0, and substitute it into each of the equations. So I write down the equations and now I'm going to substitute 50 in for X, 0 in for Y. And go through each of these and see which one or ones end up with a true statement. That means that that point can be substituted into that equation. That point, that row of data, is one of the solutions to that equation. So if we look at the first one, we have 0 equals, when we multiply, we get 22.5. That is not true, so we know that the answer is not A. The next one, we get 0 equals negative 15. That is not true, so we know the answer is not B. For the third one, when we multiply, we get 45, and 45 minus 45 is 0. So that one is true. So the answer could be C, but we need to also check D. In this one, we get 0 equals 45 plus 45, which is 90. So that is not true, so we know the answer is not D. Again, if the answer if it worked out for D, we need to move on to the second point. So for example, if we try out that second point just to double check our answer, let's put in 100 for X and 45 for Y. Let's make sure that this gives us a true statement. We get 45 equals 90 minus 45. And 90 minus 45 is 45. So that one works for this as well. So that confirms our answer is C.